Welcome, 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 welcome to another edition of the PerTspective. You know me, I love to have my favorite guest with me, Mr. Dr. Henderson. Dr. Henderson, how we doing today?
I say, Mr. Williams, matter of fact, Dr. Williams, we are doing well today.
No
And
doubt.
when I say we, I'm talking about both of us.
Yes, sir. And hey, glad you are able to join us today. I know you got a list of things you want to talk about, and I'm excited to pass that over to you because I'm ready to go into a different direction than normal. So I'm really interested in seeing what we got on this list you brought us.
Well, that's good. We need to know about it. We need to share this information because it's going to determine the destiny of millions of people for the next 3 generations.
Now, you said 3 generations.
For the next 3 generations.
Well, now that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time for sure.
So we definitely want to hear what you got. So what you got up first, Doc? Where you want to start?
Well, the first thing we're going to start talking about Black affairs internationally. And then we're going to go to the national, I would say the national agenda with Black people, state and local, and see how all of this is tied in together. And I can assure you that they are tied in. All of them have the same agenda when it comes to Black people and so-called people of color. And we're just going to talk about that and show people that there's nothing new in America and the world when it comes to dealing with so-called people of color, especially Black people.
So you say it's nothing new in the world.
Nothing new.
I'm interested to see how this goes. So let's go, Doc. What you got for the beginning of this process? You said it's going to be local first.
Well, we can start local. That might be the best way to start and look at the economics. We might want to look at religion, politics, leadership, things of that nature. I think that'd be very appropriate to start on a local level, since we don't have it 30 minutes or an hour. And we can call this part 1, if you would like, part 1. And this is a 4-part series, and we'll be able to address these things starting on the local level and just look at specific issues and problems and solutions that we must address so we can have change in Mississippi, in the nation, and in the world.
Correct. Now, what is one of those things you want to talk about that's coming up locally?
Well, first, I think we need to look at the religious sector.
Okay.
And how it works with education.
And education.
Education and religion. If we don't have a good grip on our religious standards and motivations and education and show how they should be integrated, we are not going to be able to address the other problems that we are talking about.
Now, Doc, you know a lot of people don't want to hear somebody say we're going to mix up some religion and some politics. You know, that's what they say, the separation of church and state kind of conversation. But I'm really wanting to hear your take on it.
Sir, there's no such thing as separation of church and state. You have heard me say that many times throughout the year. A good example is every time a local or state assembly is put together, they call in a preacher on the first day to open it up and bless it. When they close at the end of the session, if it's one day, a month, or 3 months, they call in another preacher to give them a blessing and say, the Lord is going to bless you and help you carry out the laws that you passed during the current administration. Then they have on the state's money, in God we trust. And everything that you find in education and religion are integrated and supported by each other. And now it is so strong until the politicians are saying, we are going to pass legislation to give to religious institutions so they can educate their children and help them with their private, parochial, and religious schools, because the public sector in education is not doing what we want it to do because of many reasons, which I'm not going to get into at this point.
Well, I can't argue with any of that. And And I'll say this, you did say that what they do is different from what they say. Because when we do open up most, if not all, political events, sporting events, pretty much, I think we have a respect for the Creator and we pray before a lot of things, but we want to talk about the separation of church and state as if we've actually done that. So we really haven't really, like you said, we haven't separated church and state. We just say it. So since we haven't separated it, I'm on board with you. Is let's bring God back into it, because clearly removing God from it has gotten us to this point, and I don't think any of us think we're heading in the right.
Well, sir, you have to understand there is a contradiction. God has already been in this entity of church and state. Allegedly, a lot of the so-called Europeans that came over here to America came because of religious oppression in their various European nations.
That is true.
And then when they started, a lot of their governments practiced what we call the Ten Commandments in their constitutions, confederations, and compacts that they put together.
They did.
But this all was what I call a fictitious move to put emphasis on the Europeans only, and they excluded all the others that were in America and those that they purchased and brought over here to America. They were excluded and didn't have the same religious principles. And when they decided they were going to get the Indians, so-called Native American, and the blacks into the religious sector,
Right.
they created a different path religiously for them. And they had a different and new religious philosophy
Okay.
and taught them different things that were in the Bible, and they summarized those to fit their purpose, such as love your enemies, suffer any and all kind of abuse, and get your reward when you get to heaven.
Now, Doc, I'll ask you this one. Now, because I've read those scriptures you're talking about, not the reward in heaven part specifically. I've heard it, however. Now, it says love your enemies and pray for them. And I'll say this. The reason I like that one, Doc, is because I've seen it in action. And let me tell you what I mean by seeing it in action. I mean, there has been a situation, and I personally couldn't see myself handling it without doing something stupid. So I prayed about it. I prayed for the persons who were doing the atrocity. I prayed for them to have a good night's sleep, good food, money in the pocket, a shower. I prayed for them to have the same things every night that I wanted for myself. And I'll say that prayer for them, because I told God, I can't handle this one. If I try to handle this, I'm going to end up in jail or worse, dead. And I actually prayed hard about that because I needed God to handle it. I couldn't do it. And to make a long story short, God handled it in such a way, had put fear in my heart, put fear, like terror of fear of God in my heart by seeing what God did. So when I say the preacher is not explaining it very well, because to me, it's, you're praying for your enemies, because the power of our words and the power of our thoughts, those boomerangs we put out, they come back. So sending goodwill to man and to humanity when they do you wrong prevents you from being under attack spiritually. However, it opens up the door for God to do work.
Well, sir, I want to disagree with that. And the reason is it takes too long for God to handle certain things. And I'm going to give you an example. Listen to me now. Listen to me.
Yes, sir.
One example that I have, and I've done the research on this for over 30 years, is when the slaves were purchased and what I call given the great opportunity to come to the land of democracy and justice. They were given an opportunity to have food, clothing, shelter, and enough medical attention to keep them alive, but they were treated worse than animals. worse than animals. And at the same time, these so-called Christians that had those people under peonage were able to tell them that you are not a human being, you are a savage. And when they decided that if they continue to talk that way, they might get the idea that they're going to rebel, and they then started writing specifically for the so-called black slaves, the Negro Bible, or what the book that I just read last week, the Nigger Bible. They have that document. I have the document, and it is definitely not similar to the King James Version in content.
Well, it's hard to tell people that there's more than one rendition of being their teachings. Now, I'll say I respect the disagreement, and I'm not saying there's a lack of my ability to explain. I'm not a teacher, so I'll do something, go one step further. If we teach them to pray for their enemies, but we're not fully explaining it to them or giving a demonstration and warning them of how powerful their thoughts, minds, and words are, then we leave out that the fact that you go in and you pray for your enemy, but then you turn your back and you talking to John about, I hope those light-skinned folk get what they deserve. I hope one day one day they gonna do it. They gonna feel what we feel. See, you just destroyed it. See, that's what I learned about spiritual law. It wasn't so much about praying for your enemies. It's also watching your mouth after that, watching your thoughts after that. So if I go and say, I hope they get this, this, and this because that's what happened to me, then I'm going to get that. So when we go and say they got us in slavery, they always holding us down, they putting us down, one of these days they going to pay for that. And I hope they get it and I do that. See, ain't none of that about prayer. None of that is saying God will handle it. And when I say about that example I gave you, done the right way, I don't think it's a delay from God's handling that situation. Like I said, I think that nigger Bible you talked about was strategically taught so that it wouldn't give you that understanding that stopped you from making those thoughts and words cancel out God's handling it, if that makes sense. Like God couldn't handle it because y'all already canceled it by bringing it back on yourself. If I hate my enemy, then me praying for him is not going to do any good. But if I love my enemy and I wish they would change, I hate to see them in this kind of situation where they're going to have to reap their what they sow. If I feel sorry for them, like seriously, I feel sorry for you that this is how you behave and how you think people should be treated. I feel sorry for the people in Israel who think that what they're doing to Gaza makes sense. I feel sorry for the people who in Gaza who attacked Israel and want them dead. I feel sorry for that. And that hurts my heart that we're fighting amongst ourselves when we're the one group of animals God put on this planet that can communicate across seas.
Let's see, what you have to understand, Dr. Williams, is the people that you just described don't feel sorry for what they have done. They want to dominate each other. They care nothing about the rights and happiness and freedoms of their opponents. Yeah. And that's why I don't tell anybody to pray for your enemy unless you pray, the Lord give me strength to defend myself against my enemy and do my best to destroy him to the ability where I can have what he has. That's freedom, religious equality, economic equality, and so on. That's all life is about. You don't wait 5 or 10 generations and beg the Lord to let me love my enemy, one that hates me, one that's killing me, one that's keeping me miseducated, not allowed me to participate in government. But every time they need me to fight a war and die, they put me in inferior positions and allow me to fight and die and lie to me and say, I'm going to give you full citizenship after this war, or after this conflict, and make it worse once it's over for you in those areas that I just mentioned.
And I truly understand what you're saying. And again, maybe I'm a terrible teacher, which I also will say. Maybe I'm not explaining it well enough, and I get it. It took a long time for me to trust it. It was kind of like having to hear about what gravity is and then begin to respect it. Respect that it's going to always work. No matter how I feel, no matter what I say or do, gravity is always going to pull me down every time I jump. So it took a minute before I was able to trust that praying for my enemy and removing the negative thought about him would bring about God's judgment fast. The further I could separate myself from the situation mentally and spiritually on a negative side, brought God's justice faster. That's what I've studied. And then I tried it and tested it, and I've seen it working. So it's something I can't explain to you. You have to test it in order to see it work. That's just like gravity. I can tell you what it is. You're going to jump off of something to see if it works. And it's an immutable law, just like the law of comeback. So we have to test these laws in order to really, truly be able to manifest their outcomes. But I do understand.
But see, that what you're talking about is for the philosophers to teach the people, and that takes generations. My philosophy is that you do not love your enemy. You prepare to protect yourself from your enemy by destroying him or her so you can get what they have if it is what you want. And usually your enemy wants the benefit of all the good things in the society and want you to have the limitations. And he or she want to dominate you and pass laws and rules and regulations to keep you at a submissive position.
Agreed.
Where you have to be accountable to them for your food, clothing, shelter, and otherwise.
And I agree with you. That is what the enemy wants. And the way the enemy gets what it wants, if you listen to the world speak and listen to the world chatter, the enemy gets what it wants is because the world speak is trying to do exactly what you said. Prepare me to destroy my enemy. Prepare me to give them back what they gave me. We're preparing to give them something that specific individuals never gave us.
Sir, let me tell you something. Now, you're trying to put some words in my mouth. I didn't say destroy the enemy. I say basically you have to fight your enemy to get what you deserve as a human being. And what you deserve is what he has.
Right.
If he has a good lifestyle, if he can vote, if he can own the banks and the businesses and other things, if his children can go to schools that's been using your tax money, and then you have to use your own money to build your school and your community, and you have no constitutional protections, and your school might disappear overnight when the local enemy comes in, when they find that your children are learning how to read. Right. You cannot tolerate that kind of stuff and pray for it. You have to form committees of independence and address those issues with the very people that's putting you in those positions of illness. And that brings on serious illness, mental stress, all kind of internal conflicts when you let people just destroy you while you're alive and you don't even fight them or organize to take what's yours as a human being.
And I truly understand you, Doc. I do. And again, I have to stand on what I've learned, not what I feel. And I truly do believe, I truly have learned, and I've seen this, I've practiced it. If the further I get out of the fight, and I mean the fight, and the closer I get to letting God go before me, and then I just do what you're saying. Now, I have to show up. and be prepared. Like I need to study. I need to research study your enemy. I need to research their strategy. I need to research their tactics. I need to understand their mindset if I'm gonna defeat them. And that's what I've done is study and research their mindset. And what I've seen them do without pulling the trigger, without doing anything, they've informed us of what their plans are, the power of the word. They told us what they planning on doing. Our silence gave them a thumbs up to continue their journey in evil. And then our hatred for them and wishing them to go and perish or whatever allowed it to stay on top of us. So what they had is a strategy. Now, when they go out here and get you to sign up for the military, right? You went and signed up to go fight and be a soldier. They didn't say, Dr. Henderson, or they might have drafted you. I don't know.
They did.
That was a draft years back in the days. So they made you go get drafted and go. But like some people were like, I'm not fighting. And they chose to go to jail instead.
Well, I didn't want to fight. I did want to go to the military. I tried to get out of it, and I couldn't. And I found out that people were leaving America, going to Canada.
Yeah.
We didn't have the resources to get to Canada.
I understand.
And I decided that, well, I'll just go in and see if I can make it out, and then I will take advantage of some opportunities that are available for soldiers. I didn't go in the military, especially during the war years, with the intention of coming out. I went in with the intention of I might be able to get out because prior to my entry into the military, I would watch the news every night. Mm-hmm. And I would see death, fire, everywhere, destruction, killing men, women, and children, things burning down, whole towns and villages being bombed, people being hanged, burned alive, shot, all kinds of things. And I knew that was going to happen to me in my mind. But once I got in that situation, I told myself that this is not going to happen because I'm going to protect myself against the enemy, and I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself by giving the enemy equal justice. If they shoot, I'm going to shoot.
Yeah.
If they throw a bomb or a grenade, I'm going to do so. If they burn something down, I'm going to retaliate and do the same. To protect myself, to protect my men, to protect the company so I can get out and take advantage of some of the opportunities. I didn't sit there and fall on my knees and pray and say, Lord, these bombs coming in here, these insurgents going to overrun our positions, and I want you to keep them away. Fire kept them away.
Right. Now, that's not what I'm talking about, Doc.
I know it's not, but I'm giving my version and the best version because your version will have people living in hell for 50 years to 2,000 years.
No, my version is more different. It's kind of like a collective agreement to stop being crazy. Let me explain. Just like we elected these officials out here that we now see as corrupt people, we now see them as liars, hypocrites, deceiving, basically everything evil. We see that now. So why are we letting them lead our children or ourselves into any wars? That's my thing, is we see who our leaders are. Yes, we made some mistakes and we voted for them. However, they're not finna lead us anywhere else. So there won't be a need for Dr. Henderson to go out here and protect himself from the evils and ills of the enemy, who is not your enemy anyway. He was the enemy created by your so-called leadership. That person over there who's in a village or in a city being drug into a war too, just like you're drug into a war because of our failed leadership. See, we have been punished and had to deal with these things because we've made bad decisions on who's chosen to lead us. See, we made decisions that got us into this situation when we have opportunities to say no. Just like you said yes to voting for them and yes to choosing them to be the leader, we can also say, no, I would choose death. I'll choose death over going to hell willingly because I'm going to follow a false prophet, a person who got up here and put his hand on the Bible and then did nothing like God's work. So that's our fault, our parents' fault. We're at fault for this. So blaming them for being evil, how are we going to blame evil for doing what evil do?
Well,
Evil
sir,
does what evil do.
Sir, I don't expect any politician, elected or appointed, or any major government leader on the local, state, or national, international level, or any preacher to do God's work in its entirety. They are very selective. And the things they are going to do, and you look at it from the local level up, is going to be first to promote my interests, the interests of my friends, and sometimes the interests of my family. And the other interests are not going to be done anyway but diluted. And I'm going to be the one to be the recipient of all good that I can get from this position.
All right, but what did you just say when we first started this program? You said we start off every political session or hearing or meeting with prayer. That's how we started out.
That's what they do.
So if we are starting it out with prayer, then I expect them to hold God's laws into their decision making. And the fact that they're not doing it is because we allowed them to get away from it.
But, sir,
We allowed them to stray, Doc.
you got to understand,
Hold them accountable.
those kind of people don't care nothing about God's law.
It ain't about them no more. See, we recognize they garbage. It's us now. See, we see what they doing. So we need God people in there. That's what I'm saying, Doc, is we know that they not. The current, as of today, we see they some trash. They have no agenda whatsoever to do God's work. So what I'm saying is tomorrow and every day past, that's when we're accountable for this. So our decisions have to be based on us now knowing the truth. I can respect the fact that they don't know nothing and haven't done anything for the past 30, 40, 50 years. I get that. But I'm saying, speaking on today, our knowledge of it, while we got the FBI running through Jackson, we fools if we put any of them back in the office. Because until the FBI got here, Doc, they like Puff Daddy. I haven't done anything wrong. These people are trying to tarnish my name, scandalize my name. They defending their wrongs. Bridges are out, potholes got rocks and dust in them. They just start putting pavement in them. They bringing guns to the meetings, Doc. Doc, that's on us. From the last November to the last that's on us. But now next November, we can't be responsible for this trash anymore. We got to be responsible for putting God's people in there.
Well, the thing is, sir, and I know from experience, and I've worked in this arena a long time, it's very difficult to get God's people to run for political office and win. And one of the first things you have to do, you have to go through the current Democratic or Republican part or whatever major part or major group there to get on the ballot. And most times it's very difficult. And you are going to be mismanaged to the point where you're not going to be given that opportunity if you are a great reformer. They are going to find some kind of opposition to put you in your position of non-responsibility, which is going to force you to lose. And if you get in office, they're going to do their best to compromise you if you are one of high character. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. You're going to have to fight them and take them to court because they're continuously trying to get those kind of people out of office. And if you're a poor man or a poor woman, you're not going to be very effective if you can't protect yourself legally and economically when they have you fired from your job.
Right.
That's why a lot of so-called good men, good women refuse to run for office, and they accept those that get in those positions and do like you say and pray that they do the best, and that's wasting their time. That's not going to happen. Their best is to look out for self. I told you that
I know that
10 minutes ago.
and I respectfully say I understand, and I'm a choose a path that will reflect what I've studied and learned, and try and keep my peace of mind with God and God power, and never give them verbally any power. See, those cowards have power behind them because people are fearful. I'm not fearful. God should have them scared of me. See, I'm not concerned with their money, their strategies, their friendships. I'm not concerned with none of that. I'm concerned with, I hope y'all hear me, because God is bringing me forward to warn you of what's coming. See, I'm not concerned with their friendships and how they feel. Don't do wrong, and I have to correct you. Don't think that I'm letting it slide. I'm not. I'm going to warn you, and then I'm going to walk away from you. And I've seen this happen. When I walk away from you, things start happening. And all I'm asking you to do is repent. Sincerely repent. I'm not asking you to do anything other than that. And I'm going to keep walking forward. And I'm going to keep on making these moves for God. And just like a Goliath and a David, Goliath can laugh, and David's going to whoop his ass.
But look how long it took.
How long? I don't know. How long did that take?
Well,
For him to throw that rock and bust him in the head?
but that didn't take but a second or two. But look at all those years that they suffered as uneducated, economically deprived slaves and servants of Goliath and his type, because they were beating him down. They should have killed Goliath 200 or 300 years before then, his kind.
Well, what if the situation was there was no soldiers for God present who had a mindset of seeking the kingdom of God first? See, if we surrounded by peasantry mindset and no God-seeking kingdoms, then we're going to stay in a bondage. Like right now with our music, and our movies that we choosing to watch and give to our children. The mindset, the mentality is they're making money. You remember they making money, and let's support them because the light-skinned people have been making money for years with porn and nasty drinks. And so now it's our turn. And as they say, once we get enough capital behind us, we can create change. Well, we haven't created any change.
That's because we have not gotten enough capital behind us, but you can't wait until you get enough capital to do anything. You can do, starting off as an individual, what you can do in your little sphere of influence to make a difference and to make a change and move forward after you form coalitions with 2 or 3 others that think like you. You can't wait for the national government or the national funders of organizations in change to do something for you. That'll take too long. I'm telling you, you have to start where you are with what you have, with the knowledge you have, the resources you have, and the coalitions you can build right across the street, right in the same county, right in the same city. Get people like you and move one step at a time. You can't wait and pray and hoping the Lord going to do something for you. It takes too long, and I don't care what you or anyone else say. Give you an example.
Okay.
Now look at this story about Noah that built the so-called ship that saved mankind. Allegedly, the Lord did not approve of what the people were doing. And he and his disciples and some of his others were telling the people they need to change. And that didn't work. So he decided he would get one of his prophets out there to talk to people and tell them that you need to repent like you were saying, because the Lord is going to punish you. My job's to save you, and I'm going to build a ship to save you. And I want you to come aboard. They laughed at the man. That took probably
It was hundreds.
100 years, 150 years.
Right.
And eventually, when the rain started, which they didn't rain very often in that part of the world, people didn't pay any attention. But when it rained for several days and the water started getting higher and higher, they decided, well, this fool Noah must have been thinking of something that was good, and now we are going to go and knock on the door and get in and be saved. And he would not allow them to come in. They only saved a handful of people, him, his wife, and his sons and daughter-in-laws. And they so allegedly started with those groups and created another group of human beings that were worse than those that missed the boat.
Okay, worse than the first one.
That's right.
So I can't say anything other than that, other than to say, I read that story and I see that the messenger, Noah, looks crazy to everybody.
That's a fact.
But he's still following God's instructions. He struggled with God's instructions because it was such a long journey for him. And he looked crazy. He couldn't entertain himself with his friends anymore. He couldn't spend time with the people he normally hung with because they now call him crazy. He's focusing on God's mission and trusting in God. And for 100 years, I think 120 years, they said it took, he looked crazy. And God gave those people time to watch his prophet manifest trees from